Now, I've done a couple videos on this channel outlining what specifically Donald Trump banned when he issued 2 executive orders banning training based on critical race theory from the federal government and from all federal government contractors. You can go watch those videos. They're still up to date. But I have to tell you, I was a little bit surprised this morning to learn that Stanford University, of all places, has put together an amazing checklist to really just help people understand specifically what is banned and what is not. Now, this is going to be particularly important because if Joe Biden makes his way into the Oval Office, and just to reiterate what I've said in all previous videos lately, I don't know. I'm not taking sides. I want to let the process play out and have us see what happens. But if Joe Biden does make his way into the Oval Office, he is going to rescind Donald Trump's executive orders on day one. What that means is that under a Biden presidency, everything that we see on this checklist that we're about to review is going to come back into the federal government and to all federal government contractors. And it's important to understand why that is a really flipping bad idea. Listen, I don't agree with every decision Donald Trump has made, but his decision to ban critical race theory was a very, very good one that saved a lot of people from going through training that is specifically designed to make them hate themselves. It doesn't enhance productivity. It doesn't enhance team cohesion. It doesn't enhance morale. It doesn't enhance any bottom line results that any organization could ever expect to get. And this has been laid out in numerous articles and studies. This is not even a question for people who understand what they're talking about. And so there was good reason for Donald Trump to ban taxpayer dollars from going to fund this training, because you don't fund training with taxpayer dollars that teaches people that they are racist. So we're going to go over this nice little checklist that Stanford has outlined, and then I'm going to show you the objections of one Stanford University professor who clearly doesn't understand the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and we're just going to have a little bit of fun with it. But before we get into that, folks, if you enjoy my content, I do content almost every single day around news, politics, culture, all sorts of different things. I usually produce a couple different videos every day, so if you enjoy what you're seeing, I hope you'll hit that little red subscribe button down below. Or if you think you're already subscribed, just do a double check for me, because YouTube has been dumping a whole bunch of subscribers from my account lately. It's been really, since election day, the last couple of weeks, it's been every single day I get messages from someone saying, Carlin, I was unsubscribed to your channel. I know, dude, YouTube's gonna YouTube. The only thing that we can do is keep an eye on it and really make sure that you are subscribed to the channels that you want to be subscribed to. Now, another thing you can do if you enjoy my videos is you can actually join my Locals community. Locals is like social media for adults. It's just these nice little communities where people sign up to join, and you don't have the trolls or the nastiness that you have on most social media sites. One of the benefits of joining my Locals is that you get all my videos ad-free. And that's completely free. There are premium subscriptions for Locals if you want to participate in discussions and book clubs and our debate club and all that sort of stuff. But you can figure that out once you get in there. It is actually free just to sign up though, and you will get all my videos ad-free. The information is in the description below, and also like in this video somewhere. I think it's like over, wait, no, it's over there. It's right below me. It's right below me. That's where my Locals link is going to be. All right, let's take a look at this checklist. And again, this is the checklist that Stanford University is specifically using to evaluate, does a training violate the executive order or no? So the first one on the list, the trainings cannot teach that one race or sex is inherently superior to other races or sexes, with an example of white men are superior. You cannot have a training based on Donald Trump's executive order that teaches that white men are superior, or that black men are superior, or that women are superior, or that men are superior, or that Latinos are superior, or Asians are superior. That is not allowed. Apparently, Joe Biden wants that to be taught. Joe Biden wants to have training that teaches that one race is superior to other races, or one gender is superior to other genders. I don't think that's a good idea, but apparently the Biden administration does. Next up, you cannot have training that teaches that the United States is a fundamentally racist or sexist country. And the example that they use for this is any reference to structural or systemic racism, and you cannot say that systemic racism exists at Stanford. That's going to become important when we look at our uppity professor in a little bit. But let's keep going. You can also not have any training that says an individual, by virtue of his or her race or sex, is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, or whether consciously or unconsciously. So this gets into the realm of like this unconscious bias, which is the idea that essentially, well, we'll look at their example. Actually, let's just read their example because it's exactly the same one I'm going to use. Whites or white men as uniformly having unconscious bias against other races, ethnicities, or genders. So what this essentially means is that you cannot have training that teaches that white people are unconsciously biased towards every other race purely based on the fact that they were born white. Joe Biden apparently wants to teach that. Of course he wants to teach that. He chose his VP Kamala Harris purely based on the fact that she was a woman and black and Indian. That was the whole basis for that decision. We all know it. Next up, you cannot have training that teaches that an individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partly because of his race or sex. An example of this, members of minority groups or women do not have or less commonly have unconscious bias. Again, Joe Biden thinks it is perfectly acceptable that people should be discriminated against or have adverse treatment solely based on their race or sex. And this is actually something that the state of California tried to pass. The universities in California specifically tried to pass this in this past election, that they were able to discriminate on the basis of race or sex, and that was ultimately voted down by the voters. Bravo, voters in California. You did the right thing and you told them no. Next up, you cannot have training that teaches that members of one race or sex cannot and should not attempt to treat others without respect to that race or sex. So the example they use here is, you can help black staff because of your race. You should affirmatively, actively try to help black staff. So what they're saying is that you should essentially, like, let's just boil this down to brass tacks, folks. They're saying that you can't teach people that you should treat others differently purely based on their race. Like, I don't know why this is such a contention. Now this gets into the idea of what critical race theory will say is that, people are colorblind, like people who say they're colorblind, that's a bad thing. That's a racist thing to say that you're colorblind. What they're doing is they're distorting the meaning of the word colorblind. So when the average person says colorblind, what they generally mean is that I don't treat you differently. You might be black or Latino or Asian or white or what have you. I don't treat you differently because of your skin color. What critical race theory tries to assert is that you are saying that you don't see their color. Well, that's absurd. Of course you see it. You are just making the decision not to treat them differently. And what this training wants to do is teach you that you should treat people differently purely based on the color of their skin rather than on the content of their character or their ideas or anything else that matters far more than their skin color. Next up, you cannot have training that teaches an individual, by virtue of his or her race or sex, bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. And the example of this that you cannot teach under this executive order in federally funded programs, any reference to reparations, implicit bias resulting from systemic discrimination, white people are inherently racist and morally responsible for historical and current racism and should be ashamed. So by proxy, we can assert that Joe Biden, because he would rescind this executive order, does want to teach you that white people today, living today, are responsible for slavery and therefore should feel shame for being white because of what their ancestors did. Even frankly, I misspoke. I shouldn't have used the term ancestors. I don't have any ancestors that were slave owners. Most people in this country do not have ancestors that were slave owners, and yet we're still supposed to be responsible for the sins of a few in the past because we are white today. That is what Joe Biden wants you to believe. That is what Donald Trump has specifically outlawed teaching in federally funded taxpayer programs. And last on the list, we have that you cannot teach that meritocracy or traits such as hard work ethic, are racist or sexist, or were created by a particular race to oppress another race. And the example that they give is that any reference to white privilege that can result into a microaggression or a specific race or sex are better performers than others, such as men, or more productive than women. Okay, that is a horrible example. That does not clear anything up. Essentially, let me lay it out for you. What you cannot teach is that white people are the inventors of schedules and the only people who can adhere to a schedule and tell time and write memos and work hard. There have actually been trainings that did this, guys. There have been trainings that came in and taught that white people are the only ones that we can expect to work hard. We can't expect anyone that's not white to work hard. That's absurd, and that's also incredibly racist. To say that you can't expect someone to work hard or show up on time or, maintain a schedule or any number of other things purely because they're not white, that is like one of the most racist things I've ever heard. I'm completely okay with that not being taught. Joe Biden wants you to learn that. Joe Biden wants you to learn that if you are not white, you are not capable of showing up and working hard. Does anyone else find that absurd? Because I find that to be completely absurd. The argument is that hard work, meritocracy, is the bastion of only white people. This is literally what these people believe and what they want to teach you at work. So Stanford has done a great job here. I will link up to this image below so that you can go and read it for yourself. And it is actually a nice little checklist. This is actually, a lot of you have emailed me lately asking me about specific trainings in your organizations and if those trainings violate the executive order or not. Well, just go down this list. Go down this list and see if the trainings that you are receiving violate any of these examples or these checklist items, and you're going to be able to assess that on your own. But we have a woman here, Michelle Dauber, who is a professor at Stanford, who takes great issue with this document. And I think it's, let's consider a different perspective, shall we? Michelle says, "My favorite banned words are systemic racism exists at Stanford. I am not making this up. Stanford policy now says that saying there is systemic racism at Stanford is now prohibited content." That's pretty effed, folks. Now, here's the question I have for Michelle. Number one, do you have evidence that systemic racism exists at Stanford University? If so, what is it? Because I'm sure the education department might like to know, because if there is evidence that systemic racism exists at Stanford University, that would actually be a violation of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and Stanford should probably be investigated for that. Just like Princeton is currently being investigated for that after their president made a speech saying there is systemic racism at Princeton. Well, guess what? If that's true, you violated the Civil Rights Act and you should be investigated. So Michelle, what's your evidence? What is your evidence that there is systemic racism at Stanford? And if you cannot provide that evidence, that leads me to question number two. If you are unable to prove that the existence of systemic racism at Stanford, then why do you want to teach people it exists? Why do you want to teach people something you don't have evidence for? One of those two things is true, Michelle. It can't be both. But let's keep going, because she went on a whole Twitter tirade here. The examples, which are not part of Trump's executive order, she's wrong about that. They're absolutely part of Trump's executive order. Go look the executive order up. There's a whole section called, wait for it, definitions, in which line up with every single one of those checklist items that are on that list. So she's absolutely wrong about that. The examples, which are not part of Trump's executive order, go much further than Trump and give you a window into Stanford's mindset that is very frightening. For example, the executive order prohibits training that says the U.S. is fundamentally racist or sexist. Yes, it does. But Stanford prohibits saying systemic racism exists at Stanford. These examples do not follow the rules. Stanford is not the United States. What is the admin doing? Michelle, the administration is trying to avoid getting investigated by the Department of Education for violating the 1964 Civil Rights Act. This is not hard, honey. That is exactly what they're doing. As I have been saying, with reference to the way that Stanford went beyond DeVos's hideous Title IX rules. Either the university agrees with these rules or it needs new legal advice. Can't wait to hear EJ Miranda spin this one. Stanford takes any racism very seriously and is also required to comply with all executive orders. Well, it seems to me that's exactly what they're doing. We will continue to work to eradicate racism at Stanford, blah, derm. So again, I have to ask, is there systemic racism at Stanford or isn't there? One of these things is true, like you can't have both. Which is it? Nothing like this would presumably be approved and distributed without being vetted by the general counsel, who has a side hustle on the board of whatever this is, and that's somehow fine. His side hustle on Huron. Huron's like a consulting group. There's nothing nefarious about Huron that I know of. Actually, like I played in the same space as Huron for a while when I was working in education. I don't think there's anything nefarious about them. Here's the department that is named on the document as having created and promulgated it. Oh my God. HR actually did HR work, and now she's trying to encourage people to basically harass the HR department for creating a document that is actually appropriate. Guys, this is an instance where the HR department has done their job. But of course, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, in the name of progressives at Stanford. Also banned at Stanford, any reference to reparations, so that happens too. Yes, Michelle, because it's, first of all, like, why are you even talking about reparations in a staff professional development training? How is talking about reparations going to lead to more productive teams, more successful teams, more cohesion, greater morale? How is it going to lead to anything that actually helps people to do their jobs? This is not about a class, folks. This is not a class that these little Marxist professors teach. That's not what this is. This is about staff training and development. This is not hard. Stanford's statement in 321. We care very deeply about racism and its derp wounds, and this document hasn't yet been fully approved, and for that reason we have taken the matter under advisement, and please report any racism you see and we'll take it seriously. Okay, whatever. And then she just keeps complaining. She keeps going, like, she's really pissed about this document. But the reality is, folks, that this is actually a good document. This has a good checklist for you to follow to understand if you're violating that executive order or not. And this is something that you can use to evaluate the training that is going on at your organization to understand if it's something that you should be worried about. So I'll link it in the description below so you have it for your general use. That's all I've got for right now. I'll see you soon.